So as I said before, interviews are broken. And how do we know that interviews are broken? Well, we know that interviews are broken because most hires, most people that get through the interview and are selected, don't excel. In fact, only about 52% of all people that are hired work out, which means that they're there 12 to 18 months after being hired. 48% of people are not there after 12 to 18 months. But it's even worse than that, because even the people that are hired are not necessarily A players. So they're not the really top people that excel. So the interview process doesn't work. It doesn't select the right people. And it's a bad interview, but whose fault is a bad interview? Well, hiring managers hate interviews and they're bad at it. Why does a hiring manager hate interviews? Because it puts them out on a limb. One of the biggest mistakes a hiring manager can make is hiring the wrong person. It is hugely costly. And research shows it's anywhere from 2 times a person's salary at lower levels to 40 times a person's salary at higher levels. And think about it, if you've been around someone who's been hired and has not been good for the position, it drives down morale, the recruiting costs are lost, training costs are lost. If it's in a leadership position, that whole department may get off track and have to be put on track. So it's a very, very stressful and a very high-risk thing to do. They hate it and they're bad at it. So what are the mistakes that hiring managers make? And by the way, I'm pointing these out to you because this is the way that interviews are broken, and this is what you're going to need to fix. So one of the things that hiring managers do is they hire based on gut feel. And there's some research out that shows that a hiring manager makes a decision in the first 10 seconds or 90 seconds, and then they spend the rest of the interview convincing themselves that whatever that decision was, it was correct. So they may decide in the first 90 seconds you're not a person that they want to hire, and they spend the rest of the interview convincing themselves. Or you are a person they want to hire, and they spend the rest of the interview convincing themselves that you are. Right? So it's this subjectivity. The problem with subjectivity is that most hiring managers end up hiring people like themselves. Right? And they may not, the person they're hiring may not be the best, that person may not be the best fit.
That's interesting because I was actually considering wearing a tie that I knew this guy was going to like. But then that's the question, does he like himself enough? Right?
Well, people tend to like people that are like them.
Right.
Okay, so there's poor job descriptions. This is a huge problem, is that many people are hired without a very clear idea of what they're supposed to do, and even furthermore, they accept the job thinking they're going to do one thing, and then they end up doing something else, and then it doesn't work out, and they're gone in 12 to 18 months, either because they don't work out and they can't do the job, or they're so unhappy with the job they're doing that they leave. So job descriptions are a mess. Then there's poorly trained interviewers. Interviewers are simply not trained. And if they are trained, they may be trained at one point and may not do hiring or interviewing for a number of months. Some hiring managers don't interview and hire for years on end. They may not supplement their staff. So that's a problem. And then interviews are only verbal. Here's another kind of silly thing about interviews. It's people, only 20% of the population are auditory learners, which means they learn by listening. 40% are visual learners. They learn by looking. Like if I was to shut this off and just talk at you, what you learn would be so much less, because that would all be auditory. And then 40% are kinesthetic, means they learn by doing. So interviews use the worst channel for learning, which is 2 people talking to each other. So at best, the interviewer remembers 50% of what you tell them, and it's 50% of what they want to hear, not necessarily what you want them to hear. Candidates hate interviews, and they're bad at it. So what are some of the problems that candidates have? First of all, candidates don't take any control or don't take any guidance of the interview. They do what everybody else does, which is they walk in, they sit down, and they answer a series of questions. Sometimes it feels like a cross-examination. Okay? Which is, by the way, why all these books are successful about the 500 most frequently asked questions. Of course, you can read all those 500 questions, and you may not be asked one of those questions in your interview. Right? And in fact, if you go online, there's websites that have over 2,000 possible interview questions. Now, how are you going to prepare for all those? You're not. It's just impossible. Right? So candidates are almost conditioned or taught that what you need to concentrate on is answering questions, answering questions, answering questions. I'm going to tell you this evening that that's not what you should be concentrating on. There's a lot of other things you should be concentrating on. So candidates don't break out, they don't do anything different, they don't differentiate themselves in interviews. And what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit later is exactly how you should be differentiating yourself, because that's the key to making the sale, to getting the job. Candidates focus on answering questions. And one of the things you'll find these days is you have all these ridiculous questions. If you were to be a tree, what kind of tree would you be? You know, if you went to a personality supermarket, what 2 personalities would you purchase? Why is a manhole cover round? And then go on and on. And what also is interesting to me is that if you look at articles online, I would say, you know, over a course of a week, there's like 10 or 12 different articles and blog entries about the 10 or 12 most ridiculous questions in interviews. Everybody loves to read these things. But it just perpetuates that whole idea that interviewing preparation is all about answering questions. And it's not. So the bottom line is you're 50% of the cause of bad interviews. And you know, it's interesting, when I give these presentations, I often have at least one person said, you know, I just went through an interview and the interviewer talked nonstop about themselves. They didn't even take time to find out about me. So it's one of the biggest problems that candidates have in interviews. So the bottom line is, and the question I always have is, why did you let them get away with that? Well, what could I do? Well, I'm going to show you what you can do. But you're 50% of the cause, but you have 100% of the problem. Right? Because if you don't get the job offer, that's your problem. It's not the interviewer's problem. Okay, fixing interviews is a do-it-yourself project. You need to fix your interviews. You can't rely on the interviewer. You can't rely on the company that you're interviewing with. You need to fix your interviews. So what I'm going to do now is I want to talk to you about branding, selling, and presenting yourself to win your next interview. Now, what I'm going to talk about, and obviously I have a limited amount of time, but it's covered in this book in great detail. And there's about 320 pages of information. So again, I'm just going to skim the surface of this tonight. But I would, you know, again, it sounds self-serving, and in certain ways it really is. I want you to buy the book. I want you to have this book. But, you know, and this is true for Ford as well. Both of us have a vision and mission in life. Our vision that we share is everybody having a job they love and making the money they deserve. And the mission that I have is developing new and innovative approaches to job search and career management to help realize that vision of everybody having a job they love and earning the money they deserve. The way that I'm bringing my vision and mission to the world is through this book and some online things. So yeah, I do want you to buy the book because I make a little bit of money on it. But even more so is that it helps me to extend my vision into the world. And it will help you land a job. I can tell you that I've done a couple presentations in the Lehigh Valley Professionals Group, which is up in the Allentown area. And there's been over 30 people from that group, and I've done this presentation twice now, that have used this approach and have landed jobs. Okay. So it really works, and I want it to work for you. So again, what I'm going to talk about this evening is some of the concepts of the book, but if you want all the great detail and the real in-depth stuff, it's in the book. Okay, so active interviewing. Okay, so a great product or service solves a problem or creates an opportunity in someone's life. if you think about any product that you use, and the most exciting products and services, it solves a problem for you. You wouldn't use it if it wasn't solving a problem for you or creating an opportunity. In fact, my contention is, nobody ever buys anything if it doesn't solve a problem for them. Have you ever bought anything that doesn't solve a problem for you? Now, it could be that the problem is boredom. So you go out to the mall and you buy, fishing reel or another pair of shoes or, a jacket or something. But everything's purchased because it solves a problem. Right? A great employee solves a problem or creates an opportunity for a company. So what problems do you solve, or what opportunities do you create for companies that you want to work for? And then how do you communicate those things in your interviews? So when you think about your brand, when you think about what your vision and mission is, and I would invite you all to develop your own vision and mission, what you want to do, what you want to contribute to the world, and how does that translate into what benefits you will bring to a company. I can tell you that you will be more powerful if you know this, and if you know your vision, and you know your mission, you will come across more powerfully in your interviews. I have a young client. He's recently, a couple of years out of college, and his goal, not necessarily vision, but his goal was to be one of the top 40 people under 40 in sports marketing. And he declared this goal when he was 25. So he has gone into a number of interviews at this point, and he has said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be one of the top 40 people under 40 in sports marketing. And here's how I'm going to do that. And he's gotten a lot of jobs in very impressive positions in sports marketing. I mean, take a 25-year-old who puts that out there. Very powerful stuff. Okay, so my basic contention about job search is that job search is a sales process. You are selling your services, your skills, your background, your experience to a customer, and that customer is a company. Now, when I say sales, lots of people get up and run for the hills because they say, I'm not a salesperson, I hate sales, and I don't like to do selling, and I like all the rejection, all that other stuff. I can tell you that you are all salespeople. You are selling all the time. If I exchange the word sale for persuasion, aren't you persuading people all the time to do something? I mean, if it's just persuading your kids to do the dishes, I mean, that's a sales or persuasion, right? If you want to have somebody accept an idea from you or to follow your plan of action, even if it's one movie as opposed to another movie, you are persuading or selling your ideas. So please rest assured you have all the sales skills and techniques that you need to sell yourself very well in interviews. I'm not asking you to be a used car salesman. I'm not asking you to sell encyclopedias door to door. I'm not asking you to get on a phone and cold call. I'm asking you, or I'm suggesting what you do is you take those basic scale skills that we all have and just then use them in your interviews. The other thing is that you need to consider the fact that you are a company of one. You are your own company, and you are out there in the employment marketplace selling your services. You should never, ever think of yourself as an employee again. You are always an independent contractor selling your services. Now, should you get hired by a company, and should you be there for the next 10 years, every day, the reality is you are selling your services to that company. And the moment they decide that your services are no longer of value to them, they will discontinue your contract. And you've all experienced this now. So you know that that's, that illusion of security. And that's one of the reasons that people don't do career management is they get hired by a company and they get this illusion of security. So you get up and you go to work every day and everything seems to be going well and they're contributing and they're happy with you and all that. And so you stop selling your services in terms of improving your services, learning more skills, finding out what else is out there in the marketplace, keeping your network going. Okay? So now you're your own company, and you need to consider that. And you need to have your own vision and mission like every other company, and you need to have your own personal brand like every other company, and you have to have your own marketing materials like every other company, resume, LinkedIn, cover letters, right? And you need to be out there marketing and selling yourself like every other company, going out to networking events. Okay? So this is your sale, and you're selling your services. Anybody have any questions so far about this? Any thoughts or reactions that you want to share? Because this is really critical about this being a company of one. For you, many of you, it may not be a new idea, but actually doing it. It's almost like people. Sometimes it's a revelation to people that in job search they should have their own business card. Business card? What am I going to put on a business card? I don't have a title in a company, but you all should have your own business card, right? Because when you meet other people, you present the card from your business, which is you. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. So I talked about the job search being a sales process. And you can break it into 3 pieces. The first part of a sales process, any company that goes into business, they decide what is it that I'm going to sell and to whom am I going to sell it. Any company that goes into business, that's their first thought, right? What am I going to make? What am I going to serve? What services? Who am I going to sell it to? That's what you need, the first thing you need to decide in your job search. What services am I going to sell? What background, experience, skills that I have? What am I going to sell and to whom am I going to sell it? And that takes a lot of thought and a lot of preparation. And then once you have that idea of what you're selling and to whom you're selling it, then like every other company, you develop your marketing materials. Resume, cover letter, biography, target market list of companies. All the things that any company would need to get out there and sell their services. Website, LinkedIn. So then once you have that together, you then move to the next phase, which is actively marketing and selling yourself. So you respond to requests for proposals, right, which are job listings, which is basically a request for a proposal. So you send your resume in. You network to meet people and to establish contacts to find out about companies that might be in the market to purchase services like yours. And you put your advertising out there, LinkedIn and Monster and CareerBuilder. You put your resume out there and you advertise yourself. Okay, that's phase number 2. And then phase number 3 is that after you do that long enough, that phase number 2, you get invited for sales calls. And those sales calls are basically interviews. An interview is nothing other than a sales call. They're inviting you in to sell them your services. Okay, make sense so far? Okay. Now, by the way, I happen to, each of the career coaches are a little bit different. I like this paradigm of a sales process. What I find is it helps people figure out where they are and what they need to do in this job search process. So you are phase 1, developing your vision, mission, personal brand, services you're selling, and marketing materials. Are you in phase 2 where you're actually doing your marketing and your networking and your advertising, or are you in phase 3? And they, by the way, they don't necessarily go one after the other. I mean, you could be in phase 1 developing stuff, you get a call from a recruiter, and all of a sudden you're in phase 3. Right? But it helps to understand what those 3 steps are. For me, again, other career and Ford, for example, has a different way of looking at this. So let's talk about this sales call. this interview. And let's look at the way a sales call typically goes. So in any sales call, there's a warming up period. Okay, there's small talk, getting to know the other person, establishing a connection. Okay. Now, I go into this in some depth in my book, but the human brain is hardwired to establish connections with people. And this comes from the old tribal days, where you would be walking down the forest, somebody would be coming the other way, and you need to decide very quickly, is this friend or foe? Am I going to have to, get ready to fight, or am I going to get ready to shake this person's hand? So are they a member of my tribe, or are they not a member of my tribe? That's hardwired into our brains. And people say first impressions, like you kind of get a feel for a person like right away. Well, same thing in a sales call. You want to say, we're on the same tribe. You can trust me. And you do that by finding commonalities. And the commonalities can be unbelievably ridiculous. And so thin, but they work. Oh, you're a Phillies fan? I'm a Phillies fan. Oh, you went to this college even though it was 30 years before I got there? Yeah, we went to the same, we're an alumni. Oh, you grew up in this part of the city? I grew up in that part of the city. Did I know you? No, but we both grew up in the same part of the city. All of a sudden, there's this tribal affiliation. So there's this warming up, getting to know you period. Small talk. Following that, there's a fact finding and a needs analysis. And by the way, I invite you to pay attention now as you get sold to. Every sales situation you go into, think about how that sales situation is going. Are they doing this stuff? Right? So there's a needs analysis. The needs analysis is asking good questions and really finding out what is it that you're looking for? What are your real needs? So if I go to buy a refrigerator at Sears, a bad salesperson would say to me, oh, what's your price range? And okay, here's this one and this one and this one. A good salesperson says, oh, you're buying a refrigerator today? Tell me how you're using this refrigerator. Do you have a big family? Small family? Do you need a lot of freezer space? Are you more interested in energy? Is ice an important thing in your life? I mean, what they'll do is they'll ask a lot of questions to understand how I'm going to use that refrigerator. Then they'll start to guide me towards refrigerators. Same thing in anything you buy. Does the salesperson take the time to really understand? One of the great examples I use is you go into a hardware store to buy a drill. You don't want a drill. You want a hole. Right? If you can purchase a hole and slap it up on the wall, you wouldn't need that dumb drill. Right? So the first thing that a salesperson should ask you about is, what kind of drill or what kind of hole do you need? Is it a hole in concrete? Is it a big hole? Is it a hole in wood? I mean, what are you doing? Are you going to put something in this hole? And so after they understand all about the hole, they can start guiding you towards the right type of drills. Okay? So any good salesperson, you do a needs analysis, fact-finding needs analysis. And the critical skill there is listening. Listening, listening, listening. And so, for example, in my book, I have a whole section on different types of listening. Active listening, passive listening, and how to do that well. The next is a sales presentation. At any point, after the salesperson knows enough of what you're looking for, they will present to you. They'll give you a presentation. They will tell you about the product. And they'll go through the features of the products. And they will, most importantly, if they've understood you, will tell you the benefits of the product and the benefits to you. That word benefits is very important. It's one of the big mistakes that people make in interviews. So when you read all these interview articles, in fact, I just pulled this offline today. This is an infographic about the mistakes that people make in interviews. And what's annoying again to me, well, my pet peeve, is it's all the standard stuff, right? Lacking humor, not showing enough interest or enthusiasm, inadequate research about the company, winging the interview, like not preparing in any way, failing to set yourself apart from other candidates, failing to ask for the job. This is like kind of standard stuff. I never read anywhere about the mistake that people make, that they focus on their features and they don't focus on the benefits. So in interviews, what most people will say is, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've been here, I've worked here. That's all your features. But what benefit is that to the company? And they leave that for the hiring manager to guess at. Now, if I tell you I have 20 years experience in project management, the hiring manager can start to guess at what the benefit is of bringing someone into their company with 20 years of experience. But why should I let that go there? Why don't I say, I have 20 years of experience, and this is the benefit it's going to have to you, and that benefit should be specific to what you've learned in your needs analysis. Right? So I have 20 years of project management experience, and the benefit to you is that you're going to have someone that can work on electrical and concrete together. Because I've heard that's what they're needing. And I'm going to talk about that benefit. I'm not going to let them guess at it. So it's very important to do a sales presentation focusing on benefits. And then you answer any questions. Right? So you have any questions? I gave my presentation. You have any questions? You ask questions. And then the last stage is the close. And there are books and books and books written on sales closing and how to do a close. Okay? And I think in here, they say that the 10 most common mistakes made in a job interview, they classify the number one mistake as failing to ask for the job. I don't agree with that. Right? So, yes, at some point along the way, you should mention that you're excited and interested in the job, and you'd like to get the job. But what I will tell you about is what I think is even more important, which is getting your next appointment. The best close that a salesperson can have is you've got the contract and here's the check. That's a great close. The next best close is the next appointment to continue the sales conversation. Now, when I was doing sales at some points in my life, I would be in a sales call, and the call would be over, and I would say, well, I'm interested in, where do we go from here? And the person would say, oh, send me a proposal. I say, okay. I'd get up and I'd leave, and I'd send the proposal. Never hear from them. Right? Knowing then, if I knew then what I know now, what I would have said was, great, I'd be happy to write your proposal. How about if we get together next Tuesday and go over the proposal together? Would Tuesday work for you? Right? So what I have is my next appointment, and I know if they're serious or not. If they say to me, nah, next Tuesday, no, I will call you. I'm not going to go to the hassle with a proposal. Just okay. So I think a better close, and we'll talk about this, is to get your next appointment. Next appointment might be another interview. Next appointment might be just how to check up. Okay, so that's the sales close. Okay, this is the sales process. Make sense? See any steps missing or anything else from the sales?
Where do we ask our questions?
I'm going to get to that.
Oh.
I'm going to guess next segment. Okay. Now the interview process. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take that sales paradigm and move it over into the interview. It goes about 90%. There's a couple of extra features you want to throw into your interview that's not in the sales call, but mostly it'll sit. Okay. So what I skip over here is that first piece, which is the bonding. The small talk, the getting a tribal connection going. Let me tell you a quick story. There was a candidate I had that was in an interview, and it was going down the drain. It was awful. In fact, they were almost like arguing with each other in the interview. It got that bad. And he looked over at the desk, and he noticed that the hiring manager had a picture of a Bernese Mountain Dog. And I don't know if you know about Bernese, but Bernese are gorgeous dogs. They're somewhat rare, although, you know, not terribly rare. And people that have Bernese mountain dogs kind of feel they're an exclusive club, and they refer to their dogs as burners. So this candidate looked over and said, "Oh, you got a burner." And they start talking about the Bernese and what it's like, and these Bernese, and they do this, they do that. He got the job. Right? And it had to do with owning a Bernese mountain dog. Nothing to do with, I mean, he was qualified for the job, but without that, it would have been over with. Okay? So the idea is you want to do the small talk, and you want to get that connection going. You want to look for pieces where you can hook into something about it. By the way, LinkedIn is fantastically helpful in this. Go out and research the people that you're going to be interviewing with on LinkedIn. You might find that they went to a school that you know of, or they may have gone to a school that your sister went to. That's a good connection. Oh, I see you went to so-and-so university. My sister went there. Well, now you're a member of the tribe. The next part is your due diligence and your needs analysis. You want to find out about the job. And you want to ask a series of questions about the job. And I'm going to give you, in a moment, I'm going to show you a tool, a physical tool that you can develop and use to get to these answers. But what you want to do, again, is the needs analysis. Now, here's the thing that the mistake that some more senior people make, is that you may have had 20 years of experience in an industry, and you really are an expert in your field and very knowledgeable. And you may be interviewing with someone that's younger than you are, and obviously doesn't have the years and depth of knowledge that you do. So you make some assumptions about what they need, what they want, what their problems are. And the mistake here is that you don't know it from their perspective. So you need to find out and understand what it is from their point of view. And you may, disagree with that point of view. You may not quite understand that point of view, but it's their point of view and you need to understand. So when you start to talk about the benefits, you can link those benefits to the problems that they're trying to solve. Not necessarily the problems that you know they need to solve, that they don't even know about. Okay? So you need to really listen, regardless of the person you're speaking with. Next stage is matching your features to their needs. One of the basic questions any interview answers is, can you do the job? So you certainly want to go through a period of time where you say, here's what I've done that will show you I can do the job. So that's what we're talking about, your features and matching your features to their needs. The next is your value adds. These are additional areas of expertise that you bring to the job that differentiate you from other candidates. So these are not the types of things that they're asking for in the job requirements. These are things that you have that other people don't. So for example, a foreign language, especially if it's Spanish these days in the United States. If you speak Spanish, they may not be looking for someone to speak Spanish. But if you do, put that out there. Give you an example. I had a candidate who, in this section, put together that he was going for a job running a factory. And in his value add sections, he put in that he could read blueprints and work with construction contractors because he had actually been involved with building a factory. So he put that out there, and the interviewer said, wow, this is great because in the next 12 to 18 months, we're thinking of either expanding our factory or building a new one. You would be great to have. Right? He got the job. Now, not just because of that, but that was a value add that he brings to the table that other people didn't. And it wasn't in the job description. They didn't say anywhere in the job description you need to be able to know how to build factories. If you think about yourself in relation to other people that you've worked with, you will come up with your value adds. And there are some things that are kind of common these days, like social media. If you know how to get around the web pretty well, if you know how to do websites, if you know how to do blogging, if you know how to do Twitter, if you know how to do all that online stuff, even if it's just using Google, great, you can do great research. Those are things that are applicable in so many jobs. Put them out there as a value add. success stories. You want to tell about your success stories. Now, these days, one of the things that interviewers, the behavioral questions, tell me about a time when. If you talk about your stories, that preempts it. So tell me about a time when you had a challenging project you worked on. If you tell a story about a project that was successful for you, it contains that information typically. So you're out there telling them already what those things that you've done, what you've accomplished. There is a whole way to tell stories in interviews. And again, I go into this in great deal of depth in my book, so I'm not going to go into it here. But what you want to do is you have a format to tell your story. The format is, what is the situation? What were the obstacles I had to overcome? What were the actions I took? And what were the results? And you need to go into an interview with 5, 6, or 7 of these stories written out. Here's the place where most career coaches fall down, is that there are many, many variations on this format. There's the STAR, and PAR, and CAR, and all these different acronyms. Right? Most of them talk about what was the situation, what actions did you take, and what's the results. But what they don't talk about is you need to have obstacles in there, because the obstacles put in tension into the story, and tension makes the story memorable. You know, I walked down the street, I went and I bought some ice cream, I ate it, and I went home. Okay. I went down the street, I went to buy ice cream, and I didn't have enough money. And what I did is I went out and I talked to 4 or 5 people on the street, and I asked them for some money. They didn't have it for me. And then I started to check into, different corners of the street. I found 50 cents, and I went and I had ice cream. It's a lot more memorable. Right? I mean, there's tension, there's obstacles to overcome. Okay. So again, and you need to have these written out before you go into your interviews. And by the way, you should already have them on your resume anyway. So these are not, you have your accomplishments on your resume, you pluck them out of your resume, and you start writing some stories. Personal success factors. What is it about you that makes you successful in the job? What are the softer skills that you have that make you successful in the job? Companies hire not just because of your technical expertise, but how well you're going to fit the culture. What's your implementation plan? Nobody ever talks about this, right? When I sell you something, I typically tell you how I'm going to implement it. If I sell you a refrigerator, I'm going to talk to you about how I'm going to come and install it at your home, when I'm going to deliver it, what I need to do, hook up the water, where I'm going to put it, all those things. If I sell you a computer system at your work, I'm going to talk about coming in and installing the hardware, and then installing the software, and then we're going to do the training, and then we're going to go live. So I have this whole implementation plan. Your service, what's your implementation plan when I hire you? What's your 30 and 60-day goals that you have when I hire you? Very powerful. What this communicates is, I know I need to add value to your company quickly. Here's my goals for the first 30 days and the first 60 days. Stating your benefits, right, which is basically kind of a sales summary. Here's why you should hire me, and here's the benefits I'm going to bring your company. And then the last is final questions and any objections that they may have to hiring you. So that's the list of things you need to do in your interview. And you're probably sitting here saying, how the hell am I going to do that?
Is there any objections?
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
I will elaborate on that, yes.
Is that another segment?
In fact, I am going to give you, just because you asked, the one best interview question of all times, ever. It's a question that you have to ask in every single interview. And I tell my clients, if you don't ask this question, you got to kick your behind all the way to your car.
Are you just going to tell me or everyone?
Well, I'm going to share it with everybody. I'll whisper in your ear. Okay, so if I was in your position now, I would be sitting here saying, how the hell am I going to do this? Like, is that what you're thinking? They would think of that? If not, I can stop here. Oh, you're the, yeah, right. Forcing it, I don't want you to do this. Okay, well, here's the good news. The good news is, okay, let me say one more thing before I give you the good news. The idea that I talked about before is you need to do this visually. You need to present visually in your interview. And you need to present visually for these reasons. Persuasion, time to communicate, learning, retention. It all improves dramatically when you do this visually. So you can't be talking at your interviewer. It doesn't work. So here's the good news. The good news is I've come up with a new tool, a new approach to job interviews. It's called an interview presentation. And this is exactly what it looks like. It looks exactly like this. So what you would do is you would make these and take this to your interview, and you would give it to each of the people that you interview with. You hand it to them. A copy for each. And this will do for you all the things that I have suggested that you do. Now, here's the reality of it. The reality is that only about 85% of everybody that puts one of these together uses it in an interview. About 15% of the people don't use it for one reason or the other. They may not be comfortable with it. They may not see an opening. They may not think that the company would be comfortable with it. However, two things. 100% of everybody that develops one of these feels really well prepared for their interviews. It's in their head. And 100% of everybody that I've worked with leaves it as a leave behind. So when they're leaving the interview, they say, I put together this presentation, I'd just like to leave it with you. And it is a terrific leave behind. It's just a really, people don't go to interviews with this level of preparation. So if there's ever any question in interviews, are you interested in the job? Are you motivated for the job? You give them this and it's clear. You've put all this work into it. Here's the other good news. Another piece of good news is it's not a whole hell of a lot of work. Okay, there's actually a site that I can point you to that will help you put this together page by page by page. And it will walk you through the process. That also has what I refer to as expert libraries, which means that it actually has suggestions for you. A suggestion for what 30 and 60-day goals should be. Hundreds of questions that you should ask in your interview, or you can ask in your interview. Additional areas of expertise based on your profession. Yes?
What's the fastest turnaround somebody's done on that?
40 minutes. I've had people spend as many as 7 hours on it, or more. But you can, if you just bang through it, 40 minutes, you can get it done. Okay. So let me take you through this. I'm going to take you through this on the screen and show you each of the pieces of this presentation. So I just want you to be sure that this is what I'm talking about up here. Sometimes it's confusing. You never want to project this. You never want to do it on your laptop, because what that does is it breaks eye contact. Also, when you hand somebody something physical, it becomes theirs. And then they typically write on it, and it even becomes more theirs. I've had lots of situations where a candidate goes in for their next round of interviews, and then people are sitting with a copy of this in front of them with notes on it. Okay. Question? Yeah.
How do you avoid them taking that and getting in front of you and losing you? How do you control the pace and the focus you want to put on certain points instead of they're off on their own race?
Well, here's the way I've done that is that in here is not enough content for them to read and understand on their own. They're speaking points, right? So it's almost like my presentation. Like if I was to give you my presentation, most of it, it has 1 or 2 lines on it, and it wouldn't make sense to you unless I'm talking to you about it. But what it does is it gives us good focus. What I've done actually, this is actually before Twitter, is I've limited, when you do this online, you're limited to 170 characters for each bullet point. That's it. When I've given this, or I've suggested to someone, hey, put together an interview presentation, they come back with paragraphs they've written. You don't want that. You actually want to use this to create a conversation. Okay, so let's look at the front page, the cover. And what you do is at some point in the interview is you would say to your interviewer, you know, I'm really interested in this job. And I've put together a presentation about my background and skills and how they match the critical requirements for this job and why I think I'm a good candidate. Would it be okay if I share that with you? And I can tell you that every hiring manager says, yeah, let me see what you got. It's new, it's different, plus it takes the weight off of them of having to run this interview that they're bad at. They like it. It's almost like a salesperson says, hey, is it okay if I sell to you? Yeah, sure. You know, let me know what you know about your product. Then what you do is you know, there's a kind of a tagline or a headline that goes across the top. Then there's the name. And then you have 4 personal brand terms. Remember we talked about personal branding. A brand is what you want people to think and feel about you. These are the terms you select. And again, we have an expert library online with hundreds of these terms. You can pick the ones that you think best represent you, and you can talk to. You don't want to pick brand terms that don't apply to you. You know, so like if I'm, you know, if I say good board presence, I've never been on a board. I can't talk about that. I'm not going to choose that. But there's plenty of terms that you can choose that represent you. So, for example, you have these here. This person chose driven, tenacious, successful, and productive. This person chose communicator, problem solver, manager, presenter. This person, analysis, innovation, problem solving, and organization. So people pick different brand terms to represent them, what they want people to think and feel about them. Then, of course, you have the logo, shows that it's personalized and for them customized. And then you also have just your contact information.
All right.
Thank you.
Eric, to be clear, that's the company's logo.
This RCO is the company's logo. This is a made-up company, but that's the logo of the company.
You do it for everyone.
You do it for each company. Now, by the way, once you've done one of these, everyone after that, you have about 85% of it completed. It doesn't, only about 15% changes for each person. And then you turn to the next page and you say, based on my understanding of the job at this point, here's what I believe to be the critical requirements for this position. I'd like to discuss them with you to make sure what these requirements entail and what you're looking for. Here's your needs analysis, right? So, even with 10 or more years of HR experience, you're looking for someone with 10 or more years of HR experience. What kind of experience is important for you in those 10 years? I understand you're looking for someone with 10 years. Can you tell me why it isn't someone with 5 years? Or someone with 15 years? I mean, there's all sorts of questions you can ask in the interview to understand and get a real in-depth understanding of their needs, the problems they're looking to solve.
Since it would be almost like taking like when you do a T letter, the requirements by qualification.
Right. But here you're having a conversation. You're talking about it. Again, one of the main reasons people aren't successful in a job is when they take the job, it's for something different than what they think it is going to be. This gets you on the same page. We have a lot of people who meet with interviewer number 1, go through this and get an understanding. They meet with interviewer number 2, and it's something completely different. It means the company's not got their act together. And you get into that position, you're going to be in trouble. Okay. Then the next couple pages are how you match those requirements. So it's really just a listing. You want a bachelor's degree, I have this, 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 and this. Here's what I've accomplished. 10 or more years of HR experience, I've done this. So it's just a listing of how you match those requirements. Goes on for a couple of pages.
What about the ones you don't match exactly?
Aha! There's where the finagling comes in. What you do is you look through the job requirements and choose the ones you match with best. And you put them in order of how well you match. Okay? And if there's some in there that you don't match at all, you can leave them off. Now you may want to address those in the interview, because one of the things I'll talk about is you have to out the elephant. If there's something that, like you don't have experience in, in construction, all your project management's been in IT, you want to talk about that, but it doesn't necessarily go here. Okay? Now the other thing is that you can pretty much bet that you match most of the requirements because they invited you for the interview. If you didn't match most of the requirements, you wouldn't be on your way to the interview. Additional areas of expertise. Again, here's the place where you add things that you value, you bring to that position that is over and above the basic requirements for the job. outstanding career accomplishments. Listing of accomplishments, and there's a story behind each one. So let me tell you about this. Here was the situation, here's the obstacles, here's what I did, and here's the results. These personal traits help me succeed on the job. Okay, what you see here are soft skills. Things you would not put in your resume, but things you can put in here and tell stories about and give examples, because it's a conversation where you can address them. I'll give you a very quick example. I'm kind of conscious of the time, as always, I'm running late. I had a salesperson, he said, I'm competitive. In here, he put competitive. I said, Joe, every salesperson in the world is competitive. You know, how are you going to put that as a, a differentiator? He said, let me tell you, Eric, here's how competitive I am. And he sold large-scale medical equipment, like CAT scans and MRIs. He said, when I went to sell a piece of equipment, I would study the hospital, but I would also study the sales teams on other of my competitors, because there's only a small number of companies that sell these big machines. Not would I sell to the hospital, but I would sell against these other sales teams. He said in at least one situation I was so successful that a company let their whole sales team go because they were being beaten so often by me. That's how competitive I am. Put it up there, right? So there's lots of examples I can give about people that have different words, and then they have examples, stories they can tell about these things. Here's your strategic action plan. And you present this, I know that I need to add value to your company quickly. Here's some realistic goals based on my understanding of the job, based on my understanding of the industry, and based on my experience. Here's some goals I think are realistic for the first 30 and 60 days. I know these are not stamped in stone, and certainly when I get on the job, I may find other things that take precedence, but as of today, here's what I think are some good goals. Very powerful. Creates terrific conversation. Sometimes the interviewer says, well, we have a fire going on that needs to be put out. Great, tell me about the fire, and let's talk about how I can put that out for you. Okay. Now, typically these goals are general enough that you're not going to get into trouble.
How do you get away from unpaid consulting? Because this is you're putting this on paper. Nobody takes it away. You don't have the job yet.
Yeah, but these are really, they're really very general. Align primary function with internship program, develop and roll out a new hire orientation program. Well, if I tell you you need to roll out a new orientation program, how to do that, you got to hire me to figure out how to do that. Evaluate relocation program, you need to do this, but I'm not going to tell you how. I'm just going to give you a very 30,000 level view of this. Now, if you ask me, hey Eric, how would you do that? How would you evaluate our relocation program? What I would say is, I don't know enough about your program to know how to reevaluate it and to redo it. But let me tell you about what I've done elsewhere and how I've gone about figuring out what to do. So you talk about the process, you don't talk about the outcomes. You talk about, here's the process I would use. I do this analysis, I do this, I do this, I do this. It doesn't give them enough information to do it on their own. That's another pet peeve I have, by the way, is unpaid consulting. Why hire me? Why hire Linda Fields? This is where you really bang your benefits. I have 14 years experience in HR, and this is what this benefit is to you. I have skill in candidate selection. Here's the benefit to you. Okay, so this is where you can really focus in and hone on those benefits. And then the last is your closing questions. And in your closing questions, you want to ask what I refer to as power questions. A power question has information about the industry, the company, or the job. Okay, so given the recent deregulation, where do you see the market moving? Referring to deregulation. I don't know what that deregulation was, but it's an important issue in that industry. Okay. Some of these others aren't so good. What do you think are RCO's greatest talent challenges? You can ask that for any company. Given the fact that this and this and this is happening, how is RCO going to find talent? Okay, so here's the answer to your question. The one greatest interview question of all time is right here. Based on my background and experience, what do you think would be the greatest challenges for me in this position? You're a salesperson, you're asking for any possible objections. you have to ask this question in every interview, even phone interviews. What you will hear is what their hesitation is about hiring you. And again, I go into great depth in the book about how to do this, because there are some little finesse things, and I'll just give you one quick example, and the others are in the book. If you hear an objection, you actually have to physically lean in, because when you hear an objection, it typically gets people uptight and scared. Well, we think your greatest challenge is you haven't had experience in this. Oh my God, they don't like me, they're not going to give me the job. What you want to do is actually physically lean in. Oh, could you tell me more about the type of experience you're looking for? Or could you tell me more about how I'm missing experience in that area? So you actually want to physically lean in and ask a question, a clarifying question about that objection. And then there's more information in the book about how you don't let them get away with not giving you an objection. By the way, let me point out, and this is very important, an objection is often good news. Because if they weren't interested in you, they wouldn't go through the hassle of giving you an objection. I think about it when you're buying something and you have no interest in buying that thing and you know there's no way in the world you're ever going to purchase that. And the salesman says to you, you have any hesitation? No, it's all fine, good, no, great. I'm going to go home and really think about it. It's much better if the person says, well, I'm a little concerned that you don't have it in the color I want. Well, that's an invitation to sell to me. Get me the color I want and I'll purchase this. I'm interested. So the objections are, can be good news. They can also be bad news, by the way. It's very clear there's no way you're getting that job. But at least you know.
Good question.
Yeah.
You're bringing to light a negative point, right? You're putting a spotlight for a moment on something that's negative in their mind.
Yes.
So what's the counsel on the timing? I wouldn't expect you want to bring that out near the end, rather do something at the end more like, what do you think I'd do positive for you? Leave them with a more optimistic stance.
Well, you can take it depends on when this happens in the interview, but typically this is not the end of the interview. That it kind of transitions back, and then there's more conversation, and you can certainly take that challenge and turn it into a positive as well. We think that you don't have skills in this. You're right, I don't, but here's how I develop those skills at other times in other ways. So you can kind of try to turn that around. You have to definitely get those, you have to know what the challenges are. I have so many examples of people that have saved their interviews by hearing a challenge and correcting a misconception. And then the next great question which you have to ask, how should I follow up with you? This is when you get your next meeting. Oh, we're interviewing for the rest of the week, we'll get back to you next week. And if I don't hear from you on Tuesday, is it okay if I call you on Wednesday? And this solves a huge problem. You wouldn't believe how many people I've spoken with or I hear from that say, I don't know when to call back, I haven't heard in a week, and it's been 2 weeks, and they said it was going to be a month, but now it's 6 weeks. Should I call? Should I email? What should I do? Why don't you know? In the interview, ask for specifics. It's like the salesman getting the next appointment. If you tell me, okay, give me a call next Wednesday, I have my next appointment. I can get on the phone and say, just as we discussed, I'm calling you to follow up on our interview from last week. Now, are you definitely going to get the interview on the phone and get all the answers? No, but you got a much better chance, and you know what you're supposed to be doing rather than guessing it.
What if it's managed by a headhunter or recruiter?
That's different, because then what I would do is I would put some pressure on the recruiter or the headhunter, because they should be following through. They should be, so your hands are tied, but it's their job. And then what they really should do is right after the interview's over, hopefully they call the hiring manager and say, hey, do you like this person? If they're good at what they do, they're doing that. So they're doing it for you. They're the proxy.
Is this for the decision maker, your brochure, so to speak? And
This is for everybody. This is everybody you interview with.
so you could be handing this to an initial HR evaluator
You can.
and asking these kinds of questions.
Yes. I had it was actually a student that was going for a job, and the interview was horrible. I mean, 20 minutes into it, it's like, thanks for coming in. We have a lot of other people. It's just going down the wizzy, right? So he said, I have a presentation about my background and skills, and I'd like to share that with you. Okay? And the HR said, yeah, that's okay. So he took it out, and they went through it a bit, got halfway through, and this HR screener said, our vice president of marketing loves these. When you interview with her, you're going to have to show it to her. So he got to the next round. He didn't get the job because an intern got the job, but he got past that first awful round. Now, let me also say this very clearly. Listen to this. This is very important. Even if you decide not to use this in an interview, putting it together is the best preparation you can do. Think about this. Think about thinking through all these different pieces, forcing you to come up with your areas of expertise and your value adds and your benefits and your match with requirements and your success stories and all these things. Even if you leave it in your briefcase, you've done a great preparation. So don't let questioning whether you're going to use it or not in the interview stop you from actually preparing this thing. Yeah.
What percentage do you think, Eric, of people doing interviews today do this kind of thing? And I have a follow-up.
0.00001%.
Okay.
People don't know about it. And that's
Right.
my fault. I haven't gotten it out to the world enough.
I met with a person at a networking event just last week who must have heard me speak. She used this technique, and Eric and I don't know each other. We've never met. But I was just blown away by her comments in using this. She used this in every interview. She said, without fail, the person was so impressed each time because they all said, we've never seen this before. And she used it, I think, as a leave behind rather than as a walking through and discussion tool. But she said, even as a leave behind, people just were going, oh, what's this? What is this stuff, So.
Okay. Here you go.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I was just impressed by how she just was blown away herself by people's reactions to using it.
And I'll tell you what else happens, which is also interesting to me, is that hiring managers who have been the recipients, they decide that should they ever go into an interview, or when they do go into an interview, they don't go in without an interview presentation. Like, after having seen it, I've been on the other side of it.
When do you pull this out?
Good question. So the answer is that people have pulled it out at all sorts of times. One place you can pull it out is when they said, tell me about yourself. Okay, well, I put together a presentation about my background skills, and here it is. And you can, and that's a hard answer for many people. Tell me about yourself. There's one person who he was actually going for a CEO position, and he decided he wasn't going to use it in the interview. And in the interview, someone asked him, so what's your 100-day plan? He said, well, I don't have a 100-day plan, but I have a 30 and 90-day plan. Pulled it out, showed him the plan. They said, oh, let's see the rest of this. Then there was this other, one example before the interview was about to end and going down the crapper, and it's like, here, There's a story in my book that about a candidate that used this. It's a long story, but I don't have time to go into it. But he used it. Buy the book. Yeah.
Suppose you're in an interview where, let's say you had a phone interview, now you have the formal interview. They invite you back for more interviews. Do you go back and kind of reconstruct this based on the first interview and then represent it again?
Yeah, I would suggest you do that between the first and second and third interviews. You can, if you have some new information, some material new information, you can change it up.
So what is the website?
Okay, so the website is interviewbest.com, www.interviewbest.com. The other website that you can look at is activeinterviewing.com, which is actually the website for the book. So let me take just 5 minutes. I know I'm running over, but I love hearing myself talk. So let me give you some quick tips, some really helpful quick tips. It shows, right? Okay, so this is very easy. First interview question you want to ask when you try to get that in whenever as soon as you possibly can. I'm pleased to be here today, and I look forward to giving you information about myself. But why did you choose to invite me for an interview? Why do you ask this question? Not only does it give you good information, the other piece of it is psychologically, when we have put some information out and we have said something about why we think you're important, human beings like to be consistent, and it sets them up to reinforce that. I invited you in because you have so much experience in this. Well, now I'm going to spend the rest of the interview reinforcing my idea that you have so much experience in this thing. So you've set me up to sell you. Important first question. Okay, and you can slip this in anywhere. I mean, just before we get started, I'm just curious, why did you invite me in today? Video interviewing. It's coming, get ready for it. Again, I have a section in my book about how you need to set up for a video interview. It's just going to happen. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's like millions and millions of dollars being thrown at entrepreneurs that do these things. So you need to set yourself up, and most of it's going to be done on your little webcam on your computer, and you don't want to be sitting above your webcam with it looking up your nose. You just don't want to. Right? So there's ways that you can set yourself up and things you need to be aware of in terms of lighting and dress and all that stuff. Out the elephant. We talked about this a little bit before. Do not avoid important issues, because if you don't address them, when you leave the room, it'll be talked about behind your back, and you won't be given an opportunity to correct them. Right? So if you are, say you're a career changer and you don't have experience in an area, you want to say, I'm a career changer, I don't have experience, let's talk about this. I recently worked with a client who had a series of short-term jobs. He was concerned about being a job hopper. And he had like 18 interviews with some really good companies. And this guy was an award-winning pricing manager. I'm like, why are you out of work? And he wouldn't talk about these things. So when we talked about it, he came up with an explanation, a quick exit statement for each of the reasons he left the job, and he would actually bring this up in the interviews. Now, he had a series of 3 interviews last week. We don't know how the results are, but he felt a lot more comfortable doing that. And he was in control of it, and he disarmed any issues around short-term jobs. Come on, this guy had maybe 5 or 6 jobs of 1-year duration. They weren't going to notice that on the resume? If you talk about it, it disarms it. The phrase that pays, I'm going to skip over this. Again, it's in my book. Invite objections, we talked about that. Get those objections out. Ask that question. Potential beats track record. Research shows that people are more interested in your potential than they are in your track record. So you want to be talking about the benefits you're going to bring and the potential that you have to help their company. Don't talk about so much and don't focus on what you've done. Focus on what you can do. Research shows that people would rather spend money on buying a young phenom ball player that may produce great statistics in baseball as opposed to a known star that already has good statistics. Everybody's about potential. That's where you want to be. Here's your first negotiating question. Same question, why did you choose me? This will give you some information about how much negotiating leverage you have. We chose you because you're the only person we could find in 5 states that knows this. My salary's gone up. Or, we interviewed 20 people, we could have chosen anyone, and we kind of spun the dice and you came up. It goes down. Okay? All right, so that's my presentation. So let me stop here and ask any questions before I get into selling the book, and I haven't sold you already. Yeah?
Your interview presentation could include your other toolkit items like the resume, your references, things like that.
I don't suggest putting them in there. You can certainly bring them with you to the interview.
You don't package it together.
I have not. Look, it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, you could try it. No one I've talked to has actually packaged them together, but there's no reason why not. This thing's kind of new, but what I've done is I've really focused in on what I think the information is that you need to communicate. So as long as you're communicating that information, if you have the resume in there and reference letters and all that, it can't hurt. You want to maybe put a divider or something. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just, is there any particular impacts you feel that LinkedIn has caused in the interviewing process that you see now with the rise of LinkedIn so dramatically?
If I had to say one thing, the impact is that the candidate can research the interviewers. That's a huge impact. And can connect it in certain ways. I mean, I've had again, I can get into lots of stories about how people have used LinkedIn to find out about who they're interviewing with. Or in one situation, I had a client who, again, with sports marketing, he went out and went to the sports marketing group